Good evening, Tanse, and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. In a Yorkton, Saskatchewan court, it was an emotional reunion for two sisters who say they were wrongfully convicted of a 1993 murder. Brent McGilvery has this from Yorkton.
I'm going to be seeing my sister after 18 years of my dad's funeral.
Narissa and Odelia Cuisance met this morning for the first time in 18 years. As advocates and lawyers argued against a publication ban on their upcoming bail hearing, Odelia says the media should be allowed to continue to report.
After 30 years, sitting in prison every day knowing that we don't belong here. It's cruel and unusual punishment for us. It's 30 years. Like, I was 21, now I'm going to be 51. I hope that they lift that ban today.
The sisters have spent 30 years in prison for the murder of Joseph Dolph, though their cousin Jason Cashane confessed both during the trial and during an APTN Investigates 2 years ago.
I stabbed him and beat him up.
The Crown brought the application for the ban, saying it may affect the possible new trial should the federal government find a miscarriage occurred. This delayed the bail hearing to the new year. Chief Lee Ketchamonia of Kiskous First Nation says having media attention would help.
The community supports the sisters. They've served a considerable amount of time, and like I said, there was somebody that admitted to the crime, and like I said, they've always maintained their innocence. So I think the media coverage would have helped keep it in the spotlight. Like, a lot of people back home don't even realize that this is going on. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for the Cuisance sisters, notifying us, nobody would know about it.
He said, often Indigenous people are treated unfairly by the Saskatchewan justice.
Odelia and Narissa, they have always maintained their innocence, and when somebody confesses to a crime, you'd think it's an open and shut case, but a lot of times First Nations people they tend to get a raw deal when it comes to a lot of the justice in Saskatchewan, and I think that has to change.
Dolph's family was present during the hearing today. APTN and CBC, as well as the woman's lawyer, James Lockyer, are fighting the ban. Odelia says she is hopeful today's hearing will result in continued public coverage of the case.
Saskatchewan knows that me and my sister were wrongfully accused. The truth is coming out, and whether, the outcome today, I feel that we are still going to get justice.
The hearing wraps up tomorrow.
For more, you can go to our website at aptnnews.ca. The Cuisance sisters' case came up in the Saskatchewan legislature today as the publication ban hearing started in Yorkton. NDP MLA Nicole Saurer for Regina Douglas Park asked the Justice Minister if the province supports the ministerial review. Here's that exchange.
Mr. Speaker, Odelia and Narissa Cuisance were convicted of murder 30 years ago. Advocates have called for their case to be reviewed for a potential miscarriage of justice. The Federal Minister of Justice has said, quote, "It has been determined that there may be a reasonable basis to conclude that a miscarriage of justice likely occurred in this matter," end quote. Does the Minister of Justice support the federal review of this matter, and will she ensure that her ministry cooperates with the review? Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Justice, Senator General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are aware that there's a federal review currently underway in this case, Mr. Speaker, and we must let that take its course. Of course, these convictions were upheld at the Court of Appeal. The Supreme Court decided not to hear the case, and it would be inappropriate for me, Mr. Speaker, to comment further.
Meanwhile, the Canadian Association of Journalists is also calling on the government of Saskatchewan and that province's Minister of Justice and Attorney General to withdraw its application for the publication ban. For more, we're joined by CAJ President Brent Jolly. Brent, thanks so much for joining us here today. If this publication ban is granted, what would that mean in terms of coverage on the case moving forward?
Yeah, well, it would be pretty significant, because a lot of the coverage would be held in secret. Journalists wouldn't be available to report publicly what is going on in the case, what the terms are, and the Saskatchewan government has also asked for all court records to be sealed. So, really, it's a pretty strong-armed effort by the government to make sure that everything is kept under wraps, and the public is also kept away from being able to see and understand what's taking place in the courtroom.
Now, Brent, can you share with us when publication bans are typically used and why it's not needed in this case?
Yeah, so typically publication bans are used to allow victims to participate, or witnesses to participate in the justice system, in trials and things like that, without the fear of having negative consequences. What I find pretty interesting about this case is I kind of question what the immediate issue of public safety is that Narissa and Odelia pose by having their information published. I would argue, I don't quite understand exactly what there really is to be withheld, given that, a lot of the damage has already been done, that these two sisters have already served 3 decades in prison for a potentially for a crime they potentially likely did not commit and were wrongly convicted for. So I think that, this is an effort by the court to try and obfuscate and deliberately keep the public in the dark. And I think that that's something that, as journalists, we need to push for, because, Justice Brandeis ultimately said, sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. And I think, journalists are well aware of how to report on these things, and not aiming to re-victimize or cause trauma. So I think it's important to keep that in mind.
And Brent, in your statement that was released yesterday, you had said restrictions would prevent the public from properly scrutinizing the merits of the case. So why is it important that this bail hearing is made public?
Absolutely. Well, this is about bearing witness to what is going on, and what charges or what accusations the government is lodging, or impediments to prevent these two sisters from seeking bail. And it's also, frankly, ensuring that justice is done and handled in a fair and transparent way. I kind of rhetorically wonder what ultimately the government and the Attorney General here and the court system have to hide, because it seems like the case has been handled poorly right from the beginning. But as someone interested in transparency, I always think that justice must be seen to be done, and in this case, I think that really rings true.
Brent, we'll have to leave it there. Certainly appreciate your time and thoughts on this.
Thanks, Darrell. Appreciate it.
Canada will seek a judicial review of a recent ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. The CHRT refused to endorse a $20 billion deal to compensate on-reserve First Nations children who were subjected to discrimination within the child welfare system. APTN's Tamara Pimentel has reaction.
The deal was meant to compensate thousands of children and their families who face discrimination within the child welfare system. But in October, the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal refused to endorse a $20 billion deal proposed by Ottawa and the Assembly of First Nations. The tribunal said the new proposal doesn't follow the spirit and intent of the original ruling it made on the same case in 2019.
Compensation is supposed to be a symbol of recognition of the injustices that someone has been through.
Cindy Blackstock initiated the case that led to the original 2019 CHRT ruling, which would have paid $40,000 to each eligible First Nations child. She says the new deal proposed by the AFN and the federal government would leave thousands of kids and their families right out of the picture.
I'm disappointed that there's going to be more litigation on compensation. There are already 3 legal orders for Canada to pay the compensation to the victims. So Canada should just move to pay it instead of more fights in court. To me, this type of action is inconsistent with Canada's pledges of reconciliation.
Manitoba Regional Chief Cindy Woodhouse is lead negotiator for the AFN and the federal government's new proposal. She says nearly 300,000 children and family members have been waiting too long.
Compensation doesn't solve everything, but it's an acknowledgement of the wrongs that they have been through. They've been through too much for too long, and many of their families broken apart. So we have to acknowledge that in this country, and we have to make sure that these families are compensated quickly and without delay and without people playing politics with them.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
All right, we have to step aside for a short break. More news when we come back. Welcome back. RCMP have laid charges following a hit and run at a residential school march in Mission, British Columbia. The incident happened in June and was caught on camera. The 77-year-old driver turned himself into police the next day. RCMP called the lengthy investigation, quote, complex. Numerous people were injured in the hit and run during the march. 2 people were sent to hospital with injuries. 77-year-old Richard Manuel has been charged with 1 count of dangerous operation of a motor vehicle. He's due in court on January 9th. And joining us from where the incident happened is Christopher Penier, who was in the crowd when it happened. Christopher, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you feeling about what happened now that a charge has been laid?
Pretty upset. 1 charge, five brothers hit, multiple lives in danger, but 1 charge. It's quite upsetting.
So I take it you're not satisfied with the charge then?
Oh, not at all. Not at all. And if anybody else is, it's upsetting. I pray for you.
So why are you not satisfied, Christopher?
We have one brother that was run over. We have 4 other of our brothers that were hit. We have how many women, children, elders their lives were put in danger, and we're getting one charge of improper use of a motor vehicle. That's not satisfying at all. If that were any of us driving, what would the outcome be?
And can you just take us back to the day the incident occurred, and maybe walk us through quickly a bit of what happened?
So I'm at the front of the pack, singing with a couple of our other brothers, leading the way. I had someone come run up to me saying somebody got ran over. And that was right as we were coming up the driveway to come up the school. I left my post up front, ran to the back, seen our brother that got run over in the back of a car with one of our sisters. Had some people freaking out, screaming, yelling, because this man was threatening people, saying he was going to hit all of us, tired of all of our Indian, were his exact words. Once we figured out what truck it was, we got the rest of the women, children, and people involved in the march off the way and kind of coming up the driveway to head towards the school. Myself and 2 other brothers kind of pushed traffic past us and tried to stop the truck, and you could see the man's knuckles going white on his wheel, and just kind of got a real ugly look on his face and just hit the gas and flew at the 3 of us. 2 of us went up over the hood. Another brother got hit in the arm by the mirror, and the other 2 I did not see. They were the first 2 to get hit. And then standing right over here beside me is where you could see in the original footage, right over here to the right, is where the man had stopped his truck, and he got out of the truck and was screaming and yelling. And that's when you can see that real controversial part of the water bottle flying at that man while he was still threatening people. Really all we're trying to do is raise awareness for the genocide against our people, and this is what we get to deal with.
All right, well, we'll have to leave it there, Christopher, but we certainly appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your thoughts.
Thank you so much.
A who's who of Inuit politicians were in Iqaluit this week discussing a northern problem they know all too well, the housing crisis. Our Kent Driscoll stopped by the Nunavut Housing Summit to see if there's any new plan to make housing affordable and available for Inuit. This from Iqaluit.
Nunavut would need to build anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 houses just to get caught up to current demand. That's why all these people are at the Oksarnit Hotel in Iqaluit for Nunavut Tungavik's Housing Summit. Federal and territorial governments and land claims organizations are all here because the scope of the problem is so large.
You can't do it alone, and you have to do this in partnership now. It's been an issue that we've really fought for many decades in terms of the lack of housing, so it's great to see every partner here.
Akiarok's government has promised to build 3,000 new homes in Nunavut by 2030. So you can understand why he would be thankful for the help. Nunavut Tungavik, the land claim organization that represents Nunavut Inuit, are hosting the summit, and they're ready to expand what they do.
We can build houses too, not just the government. They get money from federal government, and always not enough. And I think we need to work hand in hand with our Canadian government and also Inuit organizations.
Northern problems require northern solutions. When it comes to Nunavut's climate, experience is a great teacher.
We have problem with the existing housing designs are not suitable in some cases to the north. And we live in the north, why not designed by Inuit for Inuit?
Housing is the foundation that almost everything is built on. Whether or not you have housing has a direct effect on your ability to succeed in life.
It's everything. It's at the root of all the issues we see right across our territory. It's the education, determinants we've seen right across for many decades. Highest suicide rates, the social determinants that you see right across at the root of it is housing.
Especially for things like respiratory illnesses, for education, for things like being able to have a quiet space to study, for poverty reduction and food security, for people having the ability to prepare foods and to share foods with their families. Having a house, and having a house that has the right amount of people in it and not being overcrowded, is that building block for success.
It might not look that way, but there is urgency in this room. Nunavut has Canada's youngest and fastest growing population. There's already a deficit of between 3,000 and 5,000 homes. What happens when those young people start looking for a roof to put over their own heads? And that's a problem that won't be resolved anytime soon. Kent Driscoll, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
Time for one final break. Still ahead, a preview of what's to come on Nation to Nation and APTN Investigates. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Cozy Morningstar sent in this photo yesterday. It's from the Fairmont Hot Springs located in British Columbia. Cozy, we want to see an update as we expect there's been some snowfall since this photo was taken, but a great photo nonetheless. Send your photos by email to share@aptn.ca if you want to be featured as our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. We start on the East Coast, 6 in Charlottetown and 8 in Halifax. -1 in Happy Valley Goose Bay and 0 in Cartwright. 1 degree in Quebec City and 6 in Montreal. 5 degrees in Ottawa and 6 in North Bay. 0 degrees and some snow in Timmins and +1 in Big Trout Lake. -2 in snow in Churchill and +2 in Norway House. 5 degrees in Barons River and 3 in Clear in Winnipeg. 8 degrees in Swift Current and 5 in Saskatoon. 2 degrees in Buffalo Narrows and -3 in snow in Stony Rapids. As we move west, 0 degrees in Fort Chipewyan and 2 in Peace River. 5 in Edmonton, and 8 in Calgary. 9 degrees in Campbell River, and 4 in Bella Coola. 7 degrees in Sands Pit, and -4 in Dease Lake. -13 in Beaver Creek, and snow and -15 in Old Crow. -13 in snow in Norman Wells, and snowing in -5 in Yellowknife. -13 in Fort McPherson, and -9 in Colville Lake. -15 in Cambridge Bay, and -6 in Chesterfield. -25 in Arctic Bay, and -15 in Iqaluit. Here's Nation to Nation host Fraser Needham to tell us what's coming up on tonight's broadcast.
The federal government is standing by its $20 billion child welfare compensation package for First Nations children and their families, and has asked the courts to review the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal's latest statement on the matter.
You know, our lawyers have questions around the decision, the summary decision, as I said, that overturns really an agreement that is historic, that was negotiated with Indigenous people.
Minister of Northern Affairs Dan Vandal explained some of the reasons why the Trudeau government decided to nix a mining company's proposed expansion plans in Nunavut. Indigenous Services Canada officials talk about how the pediatric drug shortage is affecting northern remote communities. We'll have these stories and more ahead on tonight's episode of Nation to Nation.
And tomorrow night on APTN Investigates, Kenneth Jackson and Josh Grummett meet with 3 former gang members in Winnipeg. With the city setting a new homicide record this year, they're trying to be the role models they never had when they were younger, and they say it's possible to heal. Here's a preview of Root Causes.
Winnipeg, Manitoba, where the Canadian Shield ends and the prairies begin. From up here, it's scenic. But as you start to come down, the city shows its dark side.
You don't punch out this guy, it means you're not solid, you're just a punk. Right here, this is what they call red block. This is red block. It's very, till this day, gang orientated. You know what I mean? This is a very dangerous neighborhood at nighttime.
Winnipeg has the largest urban Indigenous population in the country, and police sources tell APTN there's approximately 40 street gangs that operate throughout the city. They're largely Indigenous-led.
I mean, there's obviously like a few different kind of gangs that, you know what I mean, I don't want to speak of, but like, you know what I mean, it was just like gangland over here, you know what I mean? Like there was wars, there was like, you know what I mean, there was shootings, there was stabbings.
Random attacks and extreme violence on the streets.
Yeah, that's what they call me ninja, you know what I mean? Like I know how to fight, trust me, because I was violent, you know what I mean? I would stab you. I'll bite your ear off if I have to, you know? But like, it's not the life.
You can catch the full episode tomorrow night right after the news. All right, that's all we have for you tonight. For more news, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Daryl Stranger. Thank you for joining us, Miigwech, and have a great night.